Hi everyone, good morning. Hi everyone, welcome to the stream. This is Soham here. It's really good to have you on board. We'll just begin the stream in a moment. Hi everyone, hopefully everybody can hear me. Let's get started. Uh, Great. So, hi everybody. Welcome to the live broadcast today. I'm Soham, and I'm here to talk to you about effective localization strategies for your mobile. I'm really excited to talk about this. Uh, in case you're interested in downloading to the yeah. In case you're interested in downloading the presentation or checking out the slides, and definitely go to previous triv.us slash effective localization. I'd be happy to share them, right? So welcome everybody. So today I'll be talking about effective localization strategies for your mobile. So this is part of our Building for India series that Trivius is collaborating with WeWork Labs. Again, super excited to bring this to you today. And thanks to the folks at WeWork Labs for collaborating on this. In case you're interested in learning more about this entire series, it's a part of a different group of events that we're doing every month. We are trying to focus on different things that we can use to build for India. In case you're interested in learning more, definitely subscribe to our Substack newsletter. It's available below. So today we're here to talk about localization, very interesting and important topic. So this is the agenda for today. I'll begin by talking a little bit about what localization is, right? I'll also talk a little bit about our background and why we think we are qualified and capable of talking about localization. It's a very complex topic. We'll also talk about what people think it actually is, and then we'll kind of change your perspective by talking about what we think it really is. We also talk a lot about the specifics of localization, lots of small things that are needed to make localization successful. Things like standards, content strategy, or search, right? A lot of engineering stuff, your Play and App Store presence, bunch of different things that are needed to make sure that localization is working for you and not against you. Lots of other things to consider as well. We look at business, finance, marketing, launch-related aspects. We look at some of the challenges that you can face while you're localizing your product, some of the mistakes that some startups make. Finally, I'll also talk about some of the tips and tricks that you can use and talk about some of the best practices that you can use to localize your product very easily. And I'll also talk about what should most people do, right? If you're a small startup, with a couple of people, all the way to large companies, right? If you have a lot of resources, what should you be doing to localize your product effectively, right? Lot to cover. Again, really excited to have everybody join today for this session. Little bit about myself. I'm Soham. I'm a founding partner at Trivius. Right, uh, I've been at Trivius for a very long time. I've been an entrepreneur and a product designer myself. So a lot of what I'll be talking about today is from my experience. Right, over the past 13 years, building products across different domains like finance, entertainment, education, and so on. If you're interested in connecting with me, those are my Twitter and LinkedIn handles. Again, happy to talk to you, connect with you, understand what you're trying to do. I've also been associated with a lot of programs. Today, I'm bringing this to you in association with WeWork Labs, but I'm also a lead anchor mentor at Google for Startups. I've been associated with the Google for Startups Accelerator program for about 6 years now, right? Ever since its inception here in India. So I've been a mentor to a lot of startups there. I've been part of all these other communities as well. So I bring a lot of my experience in building products in multi-lingual and multi-local environments today. Right? So really excited about this. Little bit about Trivius. I'm a founding partner there. We're a product studio, and we've got a lot of experience in building products for India and across the world. We started way back in 2012-13 when we were working on fintech products. We built a lot of products for people who are underbanked, right? Underbanked users in India and across the world. We built products in the edtech sector, in the agri-tech sector, right? We worked with Google quite a bit. We've also worked with IDEO on a project called Digital Confidence for Design. In fact, a lot of that is something that I will be covering today. So really excited about sharing my learnings from that project as well. Recently, I've worked with Google AI, Bharat Landscape, and the agri-tech space, a lot of recruitment products. Right? Uh, Happy to bring my knowledge across these different domains. Little bit about introduction to localization, what it really is, right? What we think what people think about it, and what we actually think it is, right? Let me start about our background and why we think we can actually talk about this. Uh, this is our product in the center called Skyro. It's an audio recording product. It's available on Android. It has about 3 million plus downloads, and it's available actually in 15 languages right now, including languages like Japanese, Chinese, uh, Korean, Arabic. Right, so it's available in 15 languages, and we spend a considerable amount of time learning about all these languages, about those different requirements there, right? We've done even left to right and right to left languages like Arabic. We've done a lot of the Play Store localization, screenshots, video, we've done a lot of support. We've done engineering specific to different locales. We've done a lot of product design, which is a bit, revolving around localization. Then App Store optimization, we'll talk a bit about that, how Play Store, App Store presence makes a lot of difference in the product strategy. Right? So we have a lot of experience doing this based on our product. Apart from this, over the years, we've worked on many other projects, right? We've worked on fintech, edtech, non-profit, agri-tech products across the world, right? And a lot of our learnings are from there as well, right? So on the very right, you see a screenshot of Bharat Agri product, where it's an agri-tech product, and learned a lot talking to farmers, understanding their product in that domain, and therefore like building for them their products, right? On the very left-hand side, screenshot of ShareChat, right, which is a product that now I've been a mentor to. That product has over 100 plus million users. It's a unicorn valued at over $3 billion. It's a Google for startup. I've had the pleasure of mentoring them at some point. A lot of learnings from how they have implemented localization for user-generated content. Right? I share some of my learnings from that as well. Uh, I've worked with many other product startups as well, like multi different agri-tech and tech products which are offline, again available in different locales, right? So sharing a lot of my learnings from that as well. I've also, as I was mentioning, right, worked with IDEO, the Gates Foundation, Google, uh, um, and the IDEO Collab team, right, to create this framework on digital confidence for design, right. I've been one of the contributors to the framework, and very interesting framework which talks about how you can create products for new or novice internet users, right. Uh, Super interesting product. My tips and tricks and best practices section, I kind of link you to this digital confidence website and the toolkit. Lots of learnings from there. Right? Definitely refer to it and learn from it. Right? Really interesting framework. Happy to talk about this today. Let's begin by talking a little bit about localization, defining. Right? Localization is the linguistic, cultural, and technical adaptation of a product to a certain market. Right? This is the definition that you find in a lot of places. Let me break this down for you. So localization is the linguistic, cultural, and technical adaptation. So if you have a product, maybe a mobile app, right? Localization is basically adapting that product linguistically first. Right? Linguistic meaning we're adapting it to that language, to that local language that we're planning to target. It's also about the cultural adaptation. Now, this is where a lot of people are not aware about this, right? People think it's just about translating a simple thing to another language and done, right? But it's so much more than that. It's also about the cultural adaptation. It's about taking the product and adapting it culturally, right? Uh, and it's also about the technical adaptation of the product to that market, right? So, of course, it's a technical product, a mobile app. You have to adapt that product technically, right? So that's also very important. So it's all the three. It's a mix of linguistic adaptation, cultural adaptation, and technical adaptation, right? And what you're trying to do, you're adapting a product, and you're doing it to a certain market. This concept of a certain market is right. Localization is not just like waking up one day and saying, "I just want to translate something." It's about identifying that market, that saying that these groups of users in this specific market will find value for my product, and therefore it makes business sense for me to build that product for them. Right? That's what this essentially means. Okay, so localization is a mix of all this. It's a linguistic, cultural, and technical adaptation of a certain product to a certain market. Okay, with this in mind, let me tell you what people really think about localization. Right. Uh, to illustrate this, I'll also talk about one of our case studies. This is available on our website, reviews.com/product-transformation. Really interesting case study, AgriTech. It's about a product. It's a hypothetical product where it's a which is designed to help farmers. Right, farmers face a lot of problems. Not being able to find out the right price of produce, not knowing what to do when pests hit their crops. They don't know how to go about certain activities. So this hypothetical agri-tech product will actually help. Right? So again, fully hypothetical. We have done a full product transformation, an existing hypothetical product into a new one. You can go check it out. But I'm using this as an example to tell you right what people think about localization and what it really is. Okay, so uh, let me tell you about what people really think it is, right? So this is a hypothetical app, again, the UI of which we have designed and put it up on the side, right? So when I ask people, right, like especially startups that I mentor at for startups and user crafts, I ask them, what do you think localization is? And they say, most of them say that it's just about translation of certain things, especially labels inside the app, right? If you see, there are a couple of buttons here. As a button called all crops, weather, farm voice, etc. Right? These are various features in our product. And when I talk to startups, they think, okay, it's just about translating these labels, right? Weather becomes something else in Hindi or Marathi or some other language. That's what you're trying to do. That is localization for me, right? Now, that's what most people think it is, right? Translation of buttons, different aspects. Now, let me actually show you what localization really is. Of course, it's about translation of those labels, right? It's about translating all these different buttons and labels, but it's so much more than that. Let me tell you about this. It's about translating so many other things, so localizing so many other things, right? This is a simple card that's at the bottom of our home screen of this hypothetical agri-tech app, right? Where I'm talking about the different upcoming tasks that a farmer has to do. Right? It's basically telling the farmer that guess what, you should level your land, right? After a certain 2 days, right, at a certain point in time, you have to go, you have to do some activity on the farm. Now, you have to understand, right? You are not just localization doesn't mean you take that piece of text and translate. right? It's about localizing your value proposition, right? Because this advice is the value proposition of the product, right? And to come to this value proposition, to be able to tell the farmer they have to do this, you have to go through a huge process, right? You have to, there should be a data collection engine where you're collecting data about weather, about conditions, about the farmer's life, their inputs, right? You're collecting data. You're feeding it probably to a machine learning model or some kind of a algorithm. Then you're inferencing something, right? You're saying that the farmer should do this, right? And then you're personalizing for a certain farmer, right? Giving their profile, the conditions, the constraints, their region, right? So this is an entire pipeline of different activities that you're trying to do, right? And localization is not just about translating the label of this piece of advice that you give. It's about localizing this entire pipeline right from the beginning, data collection to conditions to influencing to modeling, right? So it's actually a very complex thing. Of course, you will have to take this entire thing, the output of this, and translate that. That's also localization, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? You have to understand this farmer is from Vidarbha and therefore has constraints ABC, and this is, these are the problems they are facing. These are the cultural problems. These are cultural constraints, right? All those different aspects, the technical constraints, right? And therefore, you'll have to understand all of this and kind of put it in front of the farmer. So it's much more than just about translating the final recommendation. Uh, Localization is also about a lot of engineering related tasks, right? If you talk about the screen on the left hand side, you see a weather widget, right? There's so many different things over there. First, you're calling an API. The API should know that the result is going to be shown in India, and therefore you should show it in centigrade, Celsius, right? And then the format of the date should be in certain, right? Uh, if you see the market view over there, we are calling an API over there to find the price of certain products. Given how things are in India, we should be able to say that the price should be in rupees, right? It should be in a certain format for the pricing, right? For currency and for the pricing. It should be quintals, right? That's the localized kind of measurement of it, right? Uh, so the API has to be smart. So there has to be a certain layer of engineering that goes into this, right? On the right hand side, you also see a widget that talks about connecting farmers and growing together. Right? It's a community of farmers. That's where whenever you're talking about user generated content and working with other people, it's very complex, right? Because you're working with other people, right? What if you're a Gujarati farmer and you go on this platform, you click on join now, and there's nobody to ask questions to. You can ask the question, but nobody's replying to you, right? So localization is not just about putting this text out there; it's about delivering on the promise that you've made, right? The entire pipeline of that promise. Then it's also about content. If you see a bulletin below that, right? You can have farming news, you can have government schemes. Certain elements like government schemes could be static information that you can get somebody to translate and localize. But some things are dynamic like news, right? How do you tie up with the right news partners for a specific locale, right? Sometimes you might not find the right partner. Sometimes you find the right partner, right? When you don't find the partner, how can you still provide that content? Say some API to dynamically translate the content forward, right? How do you show events which are localized to the farm, right? So it's so much more than just labels. That's what I'm trying to tell you, right? A localization is not just about buttons and just translating the meaning of this. It's so much more, right? Hopefully, I've convinced you. In fact, with that in mind, I would like to dive much deeper, right? Hopefully, you've gotten a picture that localization is not just about uh, just one or two things. It's about 100 things that you have to keep in mind, right? In fact, let me talk about some of the things that you have to keep in mind when you are localizing your product, right? These are specific things that you have to keep in mind. First is standards, because whenever you're localizing a product to different uh, uh, regions, locales, languages, cultures, um, there's so many different things that you have to talk about, like different languages, different cultures. There should be a way of standardizing your approach and how you do this. Right? So standards play a very important part of localization. It's the bedrock of localization, if I would say so. So if you go to Wikipedia, there's great articles on internationalization and localization. Right? This is something that you should definitely read. Internationalization is called I-18, there are 18 characters between I and N, and localization is often referred to as L10. Right? These are standards defined by international bodies. In fact, let me talk to you about internationalization before coming into localization. And before that, I should also talk about localization. So this is a very interesting PDF by multi-lingual.com, which talks about all these three things. Let me just focus on this piece in the center, this diagram. It's basically a pyramid of localization, right? At the very bottom is globalization, then comes internationalization, and finally localization. So globalization comes at the very beginning. It's about the business decision, right, to localize it. Let's say you have a certain product and uh, you're you're at the concept phase, right? You're trying to decide if this product is for you, right? If this product should be localized or not. At that stage, you have to understand who the market is, like what is the market like, who the users are, and therefore, does it even make sense for you to localize it, right? You need to build the product in one language, in multiple languages. What could be certain, some of the challenges that you might face there, right? If you invest a certain amount of time in the localization and internationalization of the product, would you get the right return on investment? All those kind of business, financial, market related decisions you'll make at the bottom, which is localization, right? Typically done at the conceptual or very early stage of a product, but needs to happen so that you know that you should localize something, right? Next is about internationalization. Once you have made the decision in globalization that I should localize or not, then it's about the actual work of creating the infrastructure so that localization can be supported. Right? Internationalization is basically creating the engineering infrastructure, right? The entire things that you need to be able to localize it. Localization finally happens later when you're adapting the product. Internationalization is the creation of the product that can be localized, right? Without internationalization, there cannot be any localization. Okay, so this is like a pyramid which starts at globalization and then goes up, right? Let me go back to Wikipedia. I'll just like kind of read this for you so that you know, right, in context what I'm talking about. Internationalization is the process of designing a software application so that it can be adapted to various languages and regions without engineering changes. So basically, you're creating a product, you're engineering the product and designing the software application so that it can later be adapted to various languages without engineering changes. So essentially, you're trying to do this once, right? You're doing a good job in engineering and design so that you don't have to, every time you add a new language, you don't have to do this work again. Right? That is what I-18 is all about. Localization is, on the other hand, the process of adapting internationalized software. The software already is internationalized, right? So all you're doing is adapting it to a specific region or language by adding some locale specific component. So you've got a piece of software, for example, Android, right? Android is a piece of software that is internationalized for the most part, right? And you're just localizing it at that point. You're just taking some of the elements and adding some components so that it becomes compatible with say Gujarati, Hindi, Arabic. Right? Every time you're adding a different language, you're localizing and internationalized software in a certain way, right? So it's important to kind of clarify all these three terms because if you're localizing your app or the product, you'll hear about this quite a bit. Right? This in mind, let me move to some other standards that you should be familiar with. Right? That's Unicode, another really important standard. It's a standard to define the handling of characters, especially text characters. Right? Uh, you know, we have so many different characters in text. Right? We have different languages. We have emojis. We have different symbols. So, for example, uh, if you are communicating the word hello to another person, right, and that could be through different devices, it could be through a smartwatch, through a TV, all kinds of different devices, right? Uh, all elements in the entire chain, right from when you type hello, all the way to the final person or the final device who's receiving it, right, should be able to understand what you have, and the meaning of the word hello should not be lost in translation. Unicode handles all of it, right? Each character over here has a certain code, and everybody who conforms to the code agrees that I will faithfully represent this text character, right? It's not just about text characters; it's about symbols that you read, or it's about different emojis, right? This is how, if you're sending an emoji on WhatsApp or any other platform, this is how characters are being sent, right? Even though you might be speaking a certain language, you might type in Hindi, the other person can still see that piece of text, right? Without necessarily having to do it. Okay, not going to the details of Unicode. It's a fairly comprehensive standard, but it's important to read about it for localizing stuff. A lot of other standards in localization. I'm going to spend more time, but ISO 639 is an important one, right, which defines different codes for different languages. So, for example, there's a two-letter code for Arabic, AR, a lot of which I'll talk about later in the slide. For example, praise stories, things, absolute things, are kind of defined on these standards, right? So it's important to keep these in. Again, a lot more standards are out there. I'm just going to call out a couple that you should read in case you're localizing. Okay. Next, let's talk about specifics, right? Like after looking at standards, let's look at how you should think about different elements when it comes to localization. Let's talk about content first. Now, content can come in different shapes and sizes, right? You can have images, you can have audio, you can have video. I'll try to cover as much as I can, right? Let's begin with images and illustrations and icons. Right? The first thing you have to do is localize your images and illustrations. Uh, you might even have to decide, right, if you should support uh, illustrations at all or not, or should you do imagery. In fact, when I've gone to rural India, I've done user research there. My impression primarily has been that people in rural India don't prefer illustrations. They prefer images as opposed to illustrations. They feel illustrations are too cartoon, right? So understand your audience, right? And therefore localize that message that you want to send to them. Right? If you're building something for the larger rural segment of India, definitely look at images, right? But in case you're doing illustrations, make sure that whatever you're trying to depict makes sense. In this case, on the left hand side, you have a person holding a pen, right? Again, if you're targeting rural India, a lot of people are not even familiar with the concept of a card, right? You show a card, they'll not understand what's going on, right? So again, it's not just about the text; it's about what are you trying to convey, the message. Uh, Also, the apparel, right? Like if you're having characters in your images, right? Make sure that they are culturally relevant. Okay? If you look at the image in the bottom, right? If you're again targeting rural India, for example, uh, you're trying to convey success, right? Maybe the two people are talking to each other, and that image is trying to convey that you've succeeded in something, good job or something. Now, if a farmer, right, from our agri-tech example, is trying to look at this and try to make sense of it, it'll be very difficult for him or her, right? Uh, because the person portrayed in the image is very different from what they are used to seeing, right? Their apparels are different, right? So it's you need to localize your image, right? Find an image of success with, if not farmers, at least in a rural context, or at least in an Indian context, or a regional context, right? This is something that you have to keep in mind. Audit your images, audit all the different kinds of content, see if it's culturally and regionally significant. Next, let's look at icons, right? I have a shopping cart image on the right hand side. But if you're looking at e-commerce apps, right, a lot of e-commerce apps have the concept of a cart. But speaking about India, right, most people here, even in tier one cities, are not familiar with shopping carts because shopping, shopping uh, markets and uh, opportunities here for marketing are very small, right? Like so, markets are small, shops are smaller. Therefore, you don't have space to even have a shopping cart, right? Therefore, you have to make this culturally significant, right? A lot of people, especially in rural India, even today, if you tell them that this is a shopping cart or this is an e-commerce app and you're supposed to add stuff to a cart, they might not know what we're talking about, right? And it's very interesting because Flipkart, which is one of the biggest e-commerce players in India, their icon is the shopping cart, right? In fact, they have a cart in their name, right? We briefly worked with Flipkart, and they are aware about this, but now people are familiar with the name, and they resonate with them. But yeah, this is a concept which a lot of people are not familiar with, the concept of a shopping cart. Recent e-commerce product, we actually changed this to a bag, because that's something people are familiar with, right? If you go shopping, you carry a bag stuff too, right? So again, to recap, localize your content, right? Images, illustrations, and things. It needs to be culturally, regionally significant. Next, let's talk about user-generated content, right? This is a very complex and tough topic. I've had the pleasure of mentoring ShareChat, which is again a very popular social media platform here in India. There are multiple apps. Their main app has over 100 million downloads. It's a unicorn right now. I'll try to illustrate some of the problems that apps with user-generated content face, right? So let me talk about the first couple of screens over here. So if you have a user-generated content product, um, localizing it is going to be orders of magnitude more difficult than just having a like static content like video, images, icons, just like localizing. That's easy, right? User-generated content is so much more difficult because if you support 5 languages, you have to have enough content in all these 5 languages, right? You have to be able to moderate it in all those languages. Uh, and there should be enough content, right? If you select, let's say, Gujarati and it's not enough content, it speaks to your social media or it speaks to your platform, right? Also, you should be able to categorize your content. It's not just enough to have content of one kind, right? Because people are different. Therefore, you have to have all these different categories, right? Uh, if you have, let's say, 10 categories, let's say politics, news, movies in different languages, you should support content of all these different types in all the languages, in all the locales, right? So it becomes really, really difficult to kind of satisfy that. A lot of apps, especially social media apps, define their categories very intelligently to work around this problem. So you don't see categories like politics, news, etc. You see things like trending, follow, right? Just to make things easier, so that you're not defining these very hard categories, and especially initially, it's very useful. Why you get that critical mass of content and users on the platform. Now, another really important piece is being able to change content to another language, right? A lot of people in India across the world are bilingual, at least bilingual, right? They're able to speak more than one language, right? A lot of people in India speak 3, 4 languages. So if you're building a multi-lingual app, a localized product, you should be able to switch to another language really easily or see content from different languages on the same host, right? Now, over here, if I go and select Bengali, right, I switch from Hindi to Bengali in ShareChat. It takes me to a screen which shows Bengali content. Right? And this, although seems like a simple translation or simple journey, right, of changing languages from Hindi to Bengali, it's actually a very, very complex thing that is just, right? As a user of ShareChat, you will have certain interests, certain likes. You'll have a recommendation engine that's tuned to you. Now, translating the meaning of your recommendations from one language to the other, right? If I like politics, I like news, I like a specific kind of content. You're essentially taking that piece of recommendation and localizing it, right? So you should be able to find content in different platforms that match my requirements and create a feed that's customized, right? So the entire content pipeline, right from ingestion of content, tagging of content in different groups, and then finally recommending that to me when I change languages. Extremely complex engineering task, but it's part of internationalization and localization of such a thing, right? So hopefully I gave you an idea of how complex content localization and internationalization can be. Right? Great. So with that in mind, let me look at search as well. Just like content, search is a very complex piece. And you have to be very aware of the challenges in such a platform. Right? Um, Let me talk about search, right? Like in context of an app like YouTube. Great example because it's very complex kind of content because video is not easy to parse, right? So let me talk about the first screen over here, which is where I'm searching for Silai. Silai is basically taking I want to learn about it. So I'm searching for Silai, which is again in local language and supported by Unicode. You should be able to search in different languages, right? So you enter the query in Hindi over here. All the suggestions, the autocomplete, right? The suggestions, all of that has to be supported in multiple languages, right? What does that mean? That means that your entire search pipeline, like I talked about, content pipeline, search pipeline has to support multiple languages, right? So ingestion of your content, ranking, matching of that content, right? Indexing, understanding of content, and tagging them as certain things have to be localized, right? So CLI has to be matched with different things. You should be able to identify that there's a certain a needle in a certain video, and that needle is related to daydreaming. Therefore, it's related to this concept of daydreaming, right? So entire pipeline of search, right, from inferencing to kind of index, everything has to be localized, right? Again, very complex activity, but search in a local language makes sense. You know, the different levels of search, but in a complex product like it's really that complex, right? After you've searched for something, you see the search results. The search results have to be in local language. The ranking algorithms should also work in Hindi, right? So the most relevant thing should be at the top. The order should be proper. You should also have enough content to match, right? If I just have two results in Hindi and a search in that language, it will deter me from searching for them, right? YouTube as a platform has succeeded so much, so well in India just because it has so much content in all these different languages. Also because Google is a search company and they are able to index and provide that end-to-end localized search and discovery and recommendations. Right? That's the key to success. So it's not just about you having enough content. It's about making people discover about this piece of content or being able to search it effectively. Right? And of course, the UI is fully localized as well. It's also about starting the video in that language, showing recommendations and suggestions. The second, third, fourth videos are all localized, right? You should be able to create a playlist or auto-suggested playlist again based on localized suggestions, right? Very complex thing to do. Just like content and engineering pipelines, content and search pipelines, all of those are basically examples of internationalization. You're creating the product so that you can localize it, right? Let me talk about a couple of other things. Let me talk about engineering challenges. Now, this might be surprising, right? Because when we talk about localization, a lot of people don't think about algorithms or engineering as localization, right? Why? Because that doesn't seem like localization, right? How can an algorithm be localized? I'll show you an example of that. So this is an app called Todoist. Very simple to-do app, very popular. And what I'm trying to do over here is create a simple day, right? So I'm trying to pick up milk today, right? So I typed TODA and I'm just going to complete it over here. The moment I type in Y, the inference engine, the kind of tokenizer engine over here, identifies today is a special token, it's a special word, which means that this task is destined for today. The due date for that is today, right? I don't have to enter that separately, it's just inferred, right? And it's very interesting. So it makes a bounding box, a rectangle around it, knows that it's today. And then I can go about my job and kind of add more and more things on top of it and say, pick up milk today and pick up vegetable, this and that, continue, right? So I can just have a space and continue. But all of this is predicated on the fact that uh, you can create the right escape sequence over here so that you know that today is today and not something else. The moment I am not able to delimit it, right? I'm not able to identify that today is, uh, a unique word which means today, right? It doesn't work. So if I say today and I continue typing and say and, then this inference engine at no point can guess that with the high degree of confidence, this is meaning that you want to do this today. It could be anything else, right? This whole algorithm fails, right? Now, of course, in English, you would just put a space and keep on typing. But in other languages like Chinese and Japanese, where you don't necessarily have to use spaces, how would an algorithm like this work, right? Because then you would have to infer that pick up milk today and all these things have to work even this if there's no space, right? So your algorithm, your assumption that the space as an escape sequence or a delimiter would work in all languages fails at this point, right? You have to create a workaround for it. I'm sure Todoist has understood this and they have a ready-made solution for a lot of other languages. But I'm trying to illustrate my point is over here that if you're having an algorithm which is dependent on certain conditions, you're assuming certain things, right? Like spaces will happen in all languages. That's not true, right? You have to relook at your algorithms and your strategy, how you're localizing, right? Even from an engineering perspective. Even APIs need to be localized, right? There's a great article which talks about API localization, that can talks about ILT and LPAN and all, and their impact on localization, right? If you're building an e-commerce platform, right, and over there you're asking for the price of a certain e-commerce item, right? Let's say the price of a certain item is $99 and it's supposed to be delivered on a certain day. You have to make sure that you're localizing it properly, right? Because certain country you might need rupees, in certain country you might need uh, dollars. You might need tax in a certain country in a certain way, right? You might need the date to be formatted in a certain way because 8/1/2013 in US is very different from 8/1/2013, right? The formatting of the date makes such a big difference. And even symbols like a dollar, which is supposed to be standardized, can mean so many different things. You might have a Canadian dollar, right? And the value of that is very different, right? So when you're calling an API, you have to have an understanding with that API that you're providing it in certain format. And therefore, I can use the data to showcase the price of certain item, right? So you can see, right, engineering or internationalization of software can be so difficult, right? So all things that we have to talking about engineering, it's also about libraries and open source. A lot of products today are built on top of open source, right? Let me illustrate this with an example, right? That this also has to be localized. Keep in mind. This is a really interesting product, a library called Jensen, which is around topic modeling for humans, right? Like it's a topic modeling library. You can do a lot of things with it, including summarization of text, right? Very interesting. So it's the GitHub page, right? Go and check this out. Now, you would assume that if you're building a product that's a large piece of text, you can use this library to summarize. Be very happy, right? But if you read the fine print, you realize that this product is only designed out of the box to be used with English, Chinese, German, French, and Spanish, right? If you want to use it with other languages, you have to train the model, you have to train the entire system to be able to understand all the other models. If I have to summarize Japanese content, it's up to me to train the model for this. Now, of course, it's a great thing that there's a model available to train, but training a model on complex topic like summarization is not easy, right? You have to have the right kind of content, all different kinds of content in the right kind of a mix to be able to do this properly, right? Extremely complex problem. So it becomes, it goes from being a very simple thing that you got a GitHub library and you could use it in your product to being not able to support languages like Japanese or Arabic because the embeddings are not easily available. You have to do so much more. So think about this, right? Look at your libraries uh, and see the dependencies on language, right? It could be parsing libraries, it could be all kinds of libraries. See how they depend on localization or what do you need to do to make it fully localized, right? After engineering, it's also about product design and about data, right? This is a screenshot of our Skyro product I was talking about, and this is in German. It was supported in German as well. And you can see, right, a lot of interface challenges as well, right? It's a really big piece of text in the bottom for Sonstige, often information. It's a very long word at the bottom. And honestly, when I was designing it, I was thinking it would not be this long, right? And I can add a button on the right hand side, which could show me some details, right, on the right of that bottom piece of text. But it's only when the translations came in that I realized, oh my god, it's so long. There's no place for a button towards the right hand side of that, right? And I would just not be able to accommodate. So when you talk about interfaces, so many challenges around spacing, positioning, about all these different aspects, and languages like German, Russian, will really surprise you unless you're aware of these constraints and factor these in very, very early on. Right? Very important to talk about this and factor these in very, very early on without it being a hindrance to you that you uh, cannot work around at some point. Right? And for left to right languages, still okay. Right? If you're supporting both left to right and right to left languages, entire interface is flipped, right? So all the elements should make sense in that format as well, right? So keep those in mind. That see if that is a market you really want to capture. If you're doing it, what are some of the best practices around? I've already talked about date and time formats. Right? Different countries have different date time formats. You can't just assume the same thing and show that, right? Currency units, very, very important, right? The moment you show the wrong currency symbol in an e-commerce app, it's probably the end of the day, because if you show a dollar symbol, yeah, most people will switch on. To get simple API mismatch, a simple thing at the very end that if you're using the wrong Unicode symbol and you've not got the data in the right format, whatever it is, you show it to the user, they might not just want to use a product. Right? Talking about design, it's a lot about communicating the value proposition of the product, right? Communicating in line. And fonts, typography is a very important piece of that. Now, a lot of, like, let's say you have a really interesting format. You're creating a fashion magazine, right? You have very interesting fonts which are very bold. The moment you try to internationalize or localize your magazine, it's very difficult, right? Because you have to find the font in another language that conveys the same thing. Very difficult to do that, right? You might find that a certain language doesn't have a lot of different fonts that promote the same values and have the same readability, all the same characteristics and design principles, right? For most users, though, right, a font like Noto is a great start, right? It's a very simple font which offers great legibility, right? Designed by Google. There are many other similar fonts which are available in languages. You can see how it offers the same characteristics, the same amount of legibility, readability. The design principles are essentially the same, right? So upfront, right, if you know that you're hitting to a large set of audiences and you're trying to do a lot of things with a lot of people, this is probably a great choice to do, right? You don't have to think a lot about whether people in Tamil will from this time, right? Whether it will look good at a low font weight on a mobile phone, right? Because Google has done all the research for you, and they have tested it on low-end mobile phones and very high-end ones, on big screens, on screens with low legibility. They've done all the research and created this typeface for you, so you don't have to bother, right? Another really important consideration that you should keep in mind. Also, another aspect of promoting your app, of positioning your app, is the placement in the app store, right? Very key part of your entire acquisition strategy, right? Let me illustrate this with an example, right? How localization can play such a pivotal role here, right? This is an app called Shopsy by Flipkart, right? This is the English Play Store listing, and a very popular app. You can see that there are lots of elements here. There's a icon, there's the title of the page, there's a explainer video, there are screenshots. Now, the moment you change the locale to Hindi, and you can see that using the ISO 639 code over there at the top. The moment you change it in Hindi, if your a laptop or a phone's locale is already set to Hindi, it will come to this page, right? And you see that a lot of things have changed, right? The video has changed. In fact, they have found that the video is so important in terms of localization. The video is in Hindi, right? In fact, a lot of people base their app installation and their activation decisions based on the video of the screenshot. It's important that you consider this very things, right? Uh, uh, and you can see all the screenshots are localized. So if you're conveying a value proposition through these screenshots, those are changed. The people who are portraying this message, they have changed. The descriptions in Hindi, right? In fact, from a Play Store's perspective, a lot of people look at comments, look at reviews of products to see if they're getting cheated or not. It's important for a product like this. When you're installing it, you should see Hindi reviews, right? If I'm a person in a tier 2 city in India, I would like to see if the app has Hindi reviews and what are people talking about, right? So if you have an app that's localized well and there are screenshots in Hindi, but nobody is talking about it in Hindi, maybe it's not an app for me, right? So you will always come across those smart users who will look at these reviews and decide to use the app or not based on that. Now, another really important aspect of the Play Store or the App Store is about search and App Store optimization, right? And this is something people completely ignore. Localization is also about localizing the search, right? So that means if this is the page and I'm searching for a certain term, right? I'm searching on the Play Store for fashion kharidi, which means buy fashion, right? You can see that Shopsy has ranked the highest, right? Now, why are they doing that? Because the description, the name of the app, how they're kind of listing their app on the Play Store has all these different elements so that Google knows that if you search for this term, Shopsy will come up the very highest, right? Even much higher than actual fashion specific products like Nike fashion, Mitra, etc. Right? So this is the power of App Store optimization. In fact, for our own products, by the way, right? We are in 15 languages, and for English, for certain keywords, we were probably in the top 10. But we did such a good job with localization, listing of the Play Store in different languages. For languages like German and French, etc., we were in the top three. When people search for, voice recorder or audio recording in those languages, we came in the top three because we focused on those languages and we provided a solution that was end to end for them, right? So this entirety of this thing is called App Store optimization. Localization is a very critical role, right? A lot of people might not even know that Nykaa is for fashion, right? So if you want to get users, acquire users in all these different languages and vocals, localize your languages, languages and localize the Play Store listing very quickly, right? So you see your search ranking going up. Now look at Shopsy and Comment, right? Although a lot of elements are localized, the actual listing of the product, the name, the video, the screenshots, description, nothing is done, right? So if you're a Tamil user, you come over here and see it, and you feel like, okay, probably this app is not for me, right? So if you're wondering why people are dropping off at a certain point in your acquisition pipeline, you should ask yourself, maybe localization is playing an important role, right? um, Very important thing related to the App Store is pricing, right? How should you price your product? You should localize your pricing as well, right? This is a section of the Play Store which talks about top grossing apps, right? And if you see, there's an app called Nova Launcher, very popular. So I've used it for a long time, and this is typically available for $5, okay, in the US. But in India, its localized pricing is 99, which is less than $1.5, right? So understand who you're selling, who the users are, what their buying power is, and therefore localize it to that currency, to that user, right? Doing that will make sure that people feel that this is worth their time. So I definitely recommend when you're building a product in India or outside to understand that market and therefore price it appropriately. Right? With that, I would then like to also cover a couple of considerations which you should keep in mind, right? More around globalization that you should keep in mind, right? So we talked about specifics to related to localization. It's also about the business, right? Before you make any of these decisions, understand your market, right? Who are you building for? Uh, and therefore, will you get that right return of investment, right? If you are localizing that language. Otherwise, you can localize it into 15 languages like us, right? And not necessarily, be very profitable in all, right? We ultimately figured this out later on. But whenever you add that second, third, fourth language, be very deliberate about it. Right? Think of the business aspects of it, right? Think of the financial aspects, right? Localization is very expensive. Every time you push an app to an update to the Play Store, so you have to localize everything. Even the release notes are typically localized, right? So it's a very expensive process, right? You do marketing in local languages, so understand the financial impact of this and the return of that financial investment. Look at your marketing very, very clearly, right? Like on the right hand side, you can see like a lot of posters, banners, digital marketing, a lot of different things that you do. And unless you're aware of impact of localization and all of them, you shouldn't do it. Right? You have to understand that if I have to market a product, let's say in Tokyo, right? How am I going to do that? Right? What's the impact on my marketing spend and launching, right? And um, localization is not just about taking a product, changing the language, and just like putting it on the store. It's also about launching it, right? How do you create that impact? How do you market it? How do you, partner with local magazines that you're launching a product in Japan? So how do you partner with local influencers, um, local magazines in that region so that you can make a splash right, when you're launching? How do you understand who these users are? What do they want? How to calculate their engagement with their product? It's all of these are very important for you. So with that, right, like I just have to give a couple of best practices and tips that you can use to localize your product, right? Hopefully, I've given you an idea of the things you should keep in mind. Now, how do you kind of, what are some practical tips that you can use to localize your product, right? All of this is from the framework I was talking to you about. It's the framework created by IDEO, the Gates Foundation, Google, and I've been a contributor to this framework. It's called Digital Confidence of Design. Once you go to the site, you can navigate to the tools section and come to this page. It's called the inspiration tool. It has two sections. One is showing real products on the right hand side, and one is around provocations, right? Both of which will kind of provoke you to think around certain provocations, right? Uh, Let me give you some examples, right? So, one of the examples here is ShareChat. Um, so it has different sections on the left hand side, right? You can say, I want to check out some tips and tricks around language, right? Which is what we're talking about. So click that. And it shows you different examples, either in provocations format or actual products. So you can see share chat over here, right? So it talks about share chat decouples the product language settings from device language settings. So what I've seen, even I've seen this in rural India, that people keep their phone's language a locale in English. They keep it the default, right? And I've asked people, why are you doing this, right? Maybe a lot of people are not comfortable with English. They're not conversant in English. They don't understand. Still, they keep it in English. Right? When I've asked them, they've said that if I change the language to say Marathi or something else, uh, people might think that I'm illiterate, right? Or I'm not capable enough of using a smartphone. That's why I've changed it. So a lot of times it's not just about the comfort level. It's also about practical things. It's about image. It's about your self position, right? Uh, so yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't change the locale of their phones, right? And ShareChat understood this all the way back, right? So very initially, right, we launched an app where when you launch the app itself, it shows you all the different languages, right? It shows you Hindi, Marathi, Bangla, all the different languages over here, and not just show you the language, it also gives you a cultural symbol, right? So, for example, Bengali has the symbol of Durga, which is a very famous deity in Bengali, right? And it gives a sense of belonging, it gives that connection very, very early on, and you feel like clicking on that Bengali, like you feel proud at that point, right? For um, yeah, a lot of other symbols like Char Minar and all of these relate to a certain language, locale, region, and you almost feel like tempted to click it versus clicking the default option. In fact, there's no English over here, right? It's all local language. It's all designed to work around the user and what they prefer. A lot of people in India, as I've said, also support multiple languages. They are multilingual and bilingual. So, what if users could temporarily override the language, right, for content, or what if there is an easy switch between languages, right? That's this is a provocation or wireframe to kind of show how you could do that. Simple toggle button, right? So you could show two different languages, right? And you could show different kinds of content. How do you make it easy, right? So you can get inspiration from all these different aspects that I'm talking about from this website, right? Many times, products like Grab they show two languages simultaneously for multilingual users, right? Let's say I'm ordering food on Swiggy or Uber Eats or something, right? And I message somebody that can you pick me some cutlery from the restaurant, right? Maybe that person is picking things out that's not familiar with English, right? How do you support them as well? Very, very important question, right? So Grab does this really well. So when you communicate with them, they translate it on the fly into another language, right? So the person, both these parties can see different languages, right, and see what they are talking about. It makes that communication very, very easy and bridges that gap, right? Um, Google News helps users incorporate different content languages, right? So it gives that simple card that says, if you want to add another language, I want to add Hindi, Marathi, whatever, right? I can add that language right in my feed. So I don't have to go to another place, go into settings and then change it. So it's super easy, right? So these are some tips on specific things that you can do inside your app. Now, finally, I would give you some more tips on how to translate. Right, the first thing that you should not do is use Google Translate. Right, this is not something that I would recommend. I know a lot of people do it even for smaller words, but yeah, these are things that you can get easily. Wrong, right? Things like open, right? If you just go to Google Translate and translate open, you really don't know what you're opening in the other language, right? It can open a can of worms, so definitely play it safe. Don't use Google Translate for any kind of localization. Use local agencies. If you have somebody you can partner, it's great because when you work with the same agency, they get the context of your product, what you're trying to do. You don't have to explain all these things again. You can partner, right? If you're in India, you can just get in touch. I'm happy to connect with a couple of local agencies who do this really well. Another global agency that does this, like a startup, is called Gengo. It's a human-based translation, very fast. I'll talk about it in the next slide. Really well done. It's also you can also do reviews with it. So there are two people. The first person translates, second person reviews. Right. Um, if you have content, it's like news. Right? You can translate them on the fly using APIs like the translate API from Google, right? If you have an image that you want to localize, right? For visually impaired people, you can take the contents of the image, infer what it means, and identify different meanings, then translate that using API. Right? Very easy to do. Another thing to keep in mind is third-party apps. On Android, you can, to make products available in all these different locales, you might have to use third-party apps, right? Keep also those in mind. Talking about Gengo, right? This is very, very popular service, Gecko.com. Right? I have used it quite a bit, and people from New York Times, a lot of people use it. Professional human translators will do all this translation for you very, very quickly. I have used them quite extensively. This is a case study from Spyro, right? This is for Arabic. You can see that I have started this job at 8:43 a.m. and I have gotten the translation. I've uploaded 27 words and it's been translated by a human translator in about 16 minutes. By 8:59 a.m. it was finished, right? So very, very quick service. You don't have to wait, right? And you can provide context on what certain things mean. With a human person on the other side, you can talk to them, give them feedback. Very interesting product. Again, I would definitely recommend. Right? Um, Want to quickly close with some of the challenges and mistakes a lot of companies and startups make. Right? First is underestimating, right? Like the challenge. Localization is not easy. Adding even a second language is exponentially tough, right? You're kind of testing your entire pipeline, product, engineering, is everything, right? And I've seen a lot of people not plan this out, not doing research, right? They have short-term thinking, right? They don't feel like they don't know what is the investment, the return on investment. They say, okay, let's just do it anyway, let's see what happens, right? You don't really know what you're getting, right? It's very short-term. Sometimes a lot of people go into left to right and right to left. We have done our product in Arabic as well. Although we have great feedback from Arabic users, it's a really big challenge, right? Your entire UI flips over and you have to support it properly. Otherwise, it can be a very weird mishmash of things, right? So you have to keep this in mind, right? Don't go from right to left to right, or left to right to left, unless you're very clear about it, right? And you see that need and you're confident you're engineering product is. Maintenance is very important, right? Maintenance very closely related to cost, right? Localization is very expensive to get stuff translated, to maintain these things, and once you go on board, right? With marketing, all this is very difficult to come back. You've invested that amount, right? There's no point that you can go back and say, I'm not supporting this company. Right? People will be very, very angry. Product will not be right? So make that decision very, very carefully. So what should most people do, right? what should most companies do, right? These are small startups, people who are just getting started, or people who are doing profitable business. I would recommend them to stick to their brand, right? Unless you have a very clear business use case, marketing use case, and you've understood your market clearly, the maintenance and the engineering overheads is just not worth it, right? Define that use case. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but understand it before you go. For example, if you're doing an international, stick to English, right? Till the time you're profitable or you've understood the economics. So put a milestone at that point, you can go to another language, but stick to one language, right? If you translate, you decide to take the leap, stick to in-app labels, right? Like the labels which are easy to do, Play Store description, App Store optimization, those kind of things. Easier to do than pick up complex engineering challenges to do questions. Stick to L2R or left to right or right to left, right? Like don't do both, right? Unless you are very confident that everything supports RTL languages as well, right? And do a lot of use of feedback and testing, right? See if your things are working properly. Okay, what should uh, what should small to medium companies do, right? Uh, yeah, figure out your market size, right? Acquisition, marketing, finance, all those other strategies. Understand everything before you actually start, right? Yeah, like when you have more people in your company, it makes sense to support more languages based on your strategic needs, but be strategic about it, be clear about it, right? It's not like you have to support all the languages from the beginning. Make it a very very clear and deliberate action versus something that's uh, not well thought out, right? Also estimate the upfront cost, right? How much are you going to invest time, right? What is the time, effort, what is the impact on the organization, right? And what is the return of the investment, right? Very, very important to think about. Choose 1 to 2 languages. Try out your localization strategy with one language, the second language, before adding like 5, 6, 7 languages, right? In fact, focus on each one of these launches. Focus on the user base. See if you've launched a specific region, let's say Japan, right? Are your users getting to use the software? Are they giving you the right set of feedback? What is the engagement? What is the retention? Are you doing it correctly? All those kind of things, right? Focus on each thing before you add one. Wherever possible, keep it to a certain, you know, uh, a number, right? Maximum number. Because at above 5, above 10, it becomes very difficult to focus on the app, on the numbers, on the metrics, right? Then it becomes a question of, uh, like I'm just doing it for the sake of getting numbers. Like I'm just doing it for getting downloads and not focusing on those individual numbers, right? And definitely focus big time on your app name, the app store presence, all of those things. Right? Those are very, very important. Test very, very often, right? If you have a dedicated testing team who tests localization, that would be really great. Okay, let's look at larger companies. These are the companies like Motions, Google, like bigger companies that can afford to do more than five, right? These are the companies, in my opinion, who can do user-generated content, moderation, share chat, Instagram, right? When you have above 100 people, at that scale, you will catch these problems really quickly. You still face challenges on feedback, on quality, on moderation, on scale, engineering, right? These are all challenges. You will figure those things out at scale, right? And testing is very, very important, right? Make sure you're testing it properly, right? And you have a dedicated team, right? And you'll catch things really quickly. You can do many languages, a lot of moderation, a lot of different pieces that you might use. So have automated as well as tests. With that, I've come to the end of the presentation. A quick recap. I started with an introduction about our background. I told you what people really think about localization and what it actually is, right? Then I went into all the specifics of localization, standards, content, search, store, many, many other things, including design, front engineering, right? Finally, I also talked about the challenges in all of this, mistakes most people make, small companies, large companies, what you should do, right? And the overall strategy, right? Hopefully, this has been a useful and relevant session to you. In case you're interested in listening more from us, like we share cheat sheets and a lot of other things on our newsletter, definitely subscribe on reviews.substack.com. The next talk from my side will be on impactful retention strategies, right, for your mobile app. Really interesting talk, super helpful for startups. Definitely subscribe if you want to tune in for that. Um, yeah, with that, we've come to the end of the presentation. In case you're interested in downloading the slides, it's available at reviews/effective localization. That's a link to our Substack newsletter as well as to our product transformation piece that I talked about previously. We do a lot of work around design and development. The user research or the design, a lot of our learnings are from there. Definitely get in touch if you want to talk to us and see what we've done or if you have any questions. With that, I have one question that just came in before the talk started from one of the viewers of this live stream. Right? The question was how to drive adoption of your app if your target population is in India, right? Very interesting question, right? Like uh, driving adoption, especially in rural India, is very very challenging, right? Because a lot of them don't subscribe to the traditional ways of living, right? So what I would definitely recommend people do is localize first of all, right? Understand what is the market you want to go after. Localize in that language again could be a very complex process. Uh, Leverage localization, leverage local communities and people, right? That's how people hear about products when somebody in the local community comes and talks to them about it. If your app is good enough, right? See if you can build a viral, local loop, right? Which people can share on other social media platforms like ShareChat, WhatsApp, etc. Right? And people can talk about your product. See if you can do some referral mechanism, right? Another thing that you have to get right is onboarding, activation, engagement, value proposition. All these things I've talked about in my previous talks as well. Make sure you're doing that properly. Uh, for novice internet users, people who are coming on board for the first time, who's using a smartphone for the first time, make sure you're assisting them in the right way. It could be in the form of a physical person or a phone call or an in-app voice assistant, so you can help them, right? If they're stuck in a certain flow, maybe there's a voice assistant which comes up and kind of holds their hand and drives them through the entire flow. App Store optimization is very important. I talked about it. That's how people discover products, right? Make sure you're there, right, on the App Store, you localize properly, right? So these are just some strategies that you can use to drive adoption of your app, and the beginning of a lot of this localization, right? With that, we've come to the end of our presentation, right? Hopefully, this has made sense to everybody here, right? And let me see, there are a couple of questions in the live stream. Yeah, there are a couple of questions. I'll just take those questions as well. So Ivan has asked, right? A lot of the portfolio companies are. What are your thoughts on outsourcing versus in-house UI UX talent, right? That's a great question, right? There's a good place for both of them, Arvind. You know, at some point, if you have scale, if you're doing a lot of different things and you have to understand the product in depth, then maybe for that use case, if you have an evolved product, you have to constantly add different features to it. It makes sense to have an in-house UX team, right? But in a lot of other contexts, when you're getting started, or when you need a deep dive in a specific field, or you need expertise really quickly, a lot of use cases where an outsourcing or a design studio could really help, right? So it all depends on the use case, right? So um, yeah, so that's probably the answer to that question. Follow-up question: at what stage should startups be thinking of onboarding a UI UX full-time team member? Yeah, that's a great question, right? So, uh, um, once your product is, has reached a certain level of maturity, right? And you have to kind of dive very deep into the product, and you have to do multiple things, right? That's a point, right? Where I think getting a full-time member makes sense, right? But you've gotten some kind of traction, right? Or if you've raised funding and there's a very clear need for a certain kind of a product line, right? Where you're either doing research, right, and you need to do a lot of research across different things, and then therefore build a product on top of that. At that point is as well, right? So it all depends on context, but uh, yeah, I mean, typically we've seen this works really well when you've reached some kind of attraction, or you've launched some version of the product, gotten feedback from users on a product that's not really that's not got a lot of UX behind it, but you've got the thought process right. At that point, it's a good point to think about whether you should onboard somebody full time. Great. So I think further questions. With that, we'll end the live stream. And thanks for everybody who's attended, and hopefully it was useful to you. This product design session is part of our Building for India series that is being done by we work as well as Travis. So definitely tune in for our next session, which will happen April. So look forward to meeting all of you. This will also be available on YouTube and various platforms. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.